1, 2, 3, 4.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Seen so far, and as well as I may think I know this stuff, I always learn something new, because we have really seen a never-ending stream of some of the most capable, sophisticated, and intelligent professionals in the known universe coming before us. And I know we're all a lot smarter, and our brains are open to new ideas and new possibilities and new realities. We've talked a lot about opportunities, even to correct historic mistakes that have piled up over the last 400 or 500 years of industrial revolution here. But now it's time to roll the sleeves up and get the work done. And so we're going to bring it home with the big steak on our sizzling menu of solar redevelopment programming. And to get us started today and bring one of our 2 feature issues home and give us the last word on what we broadly define as pollinators, but I think as an old dirt lawyer, I think about it as greenfields. Mr. Joe Belmonte with ECS, he's here to tell us, the work that they're doing kind of above the ground and below the solar panels. And we've seen already, Joe, so far. I know you've been watching, following along. It's a super hot issue, but super important, because we really have to do this stuff right, and there's real engineering involved.
For sure. I appreciate it, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity, and let me share my screen here. I've got a few slides and get going. But when you and I were talking and we decided to sponsor this, I appreciate the opportunity. A lot of what I do, I work for Environmental Construction Solutions as a business development manager, and we're a supplier of construction supplies and erosion control and stormwater. So we're kind of in the trenches on this stuff day to day, working with contractors, working with engineers on the specification side. And I took a little gamble and tried to imagine what Robin would say this morning, and Mr. Ernst and Dan and some of the other ones this week. And I'm glad I did, because there's been some real good discussions and some real frank talk about challenges on solar farms with regards to vegetative establishment and erosion control, and that's kind of what I'm into every day. So I thought I'd go through a few slides and just talk about a real 10,000 foot view, as the old saying goes, and of some things I've seen over 10 years in this business and on solar farms in North Carolina and now into Virginia. And so what I always start with is I ask the question, what do solar farms and a football field have in common? And Virginia and most of the mid-Atlantic is in what's called the transition zone, and it's where cool season and warm season grasses both grow, and that's very integral. And so we talked a little bit about nurse crops earlier this week, but we put that into perspective with the Virginia Tech football field, and I know we've probably got some Hokies here today, but that's a Bermuda grass field. So the first home game, you're looking at lush green Bermuda from the summer. But what happens is that Bermuda goes dormant and goes brown. It doesn't die, it goes dormant and brown. And so the turf grass managers there, they plant ryegrass. So when you're at the last home game, you're seeing, lush ryegrass that when you see the green field. So that's incredibly basic, but you would be absolutely amazed at the number of contractors, engineers, municipal folks, erosion control inspectors that really don't grasp that. They've never been taught it. Maybe they're from Virginia and, we've kind of moved to a non-agrarian society, or maybe they're from other parts of the world and they're coming into Virginia and really don't understand that. But it's definitely something to consider, is what do you need to plant at what time of the year, whether it be a reclamation mix or a pollinator mix. And just moving right along as you think of that, let's jump in and talk about soil testing. $26 is the cost of the soil test, and it can go a long way on a huge project. That picture on the left is a project that I was called out to, and that area right there under those panels had been seeded twice and they couldn't get any vegetation. And my first response was, well, let me see your soil test. And there was 5 or 6 people with me and they were all blank stares. And so, that's an integral part in trying to figure things out on a construction site. And, conversely, the site on the right, we took several soil tests and sent to the lab, and we were able to create a per acre rate of things that actually established vegetation the first time. So again, this is pretty basic with regards to vegetative establishment. But what's interesting in Virginia is that the Sediment and Erosion Control Handbook, it actually calls for soil testing on job sites, but then it has this lengthy session in it about, in lieu of a soil test, use X number of pounds of lime and fertilizer. And what happens, unfortunately, on large projects is that these in lieu of numbers become cut and pasted, and they become like the specification. And then you have folks that are trying to bid these large projects, and it just becomes the end all be all, and what ends up planted and what ends up used with fertility. And, when you talk about a construction site where the topsoil has been stripped away, it's simply not enough to sustain vegetation. So the other thing, the flip side of that is that I go out to sites and folks tell me, well, I've got my seed specification and I understand the pH, and they're really in tune to all the soil amendments and things involved with the soil and vegetation and erosion control. And they say, but I can't get grass to grow. And I say, well, let me take a soil test just to be sure. And I've got my little shovel and a soil test probe, if you know what that is. And Dan, I literally look like I'm mining for gold. I go out there and I have to take my little shovel and use it like a pickaxe to break up the soil enough to get a Ziploc bag full of loose dirt for a soil test. And Calvin Ernst talked about that a little bit in compaction, and some other folks did. But, when you're driving over construction soils all day, every day, you're going to compact them, and water and air and nutrients are not going to be allowed to get into the soil to make things grow. So if you can't stick your shovel in the ground a little ways with the weight of your own, foot, you're going to have a real problem growing vegetation. And I put these two pictures on the right here because the last two farms I've been on, our recommendation was really less about fertility and seed and more about the fact that, before permanent seeding, you really need to break up the soil again. And that's a Ventrac on the top with an aerator. Now that's not an aerator like you see in your yard that pulls up plugs when you seed in the fall or the spring. That actually fractures the soil and lets water and air gets down in there. And then the bottom one is a rock hound, and it's kind of like a landscaping rake that's on a skid steer. But why I put these up there is that they can very easily be maneuvered between rows of solar panels if you're going back for permanent seeding after your panels are already up. And that's one of the things that we see a lot that needs to be done. So when you talk more about, vegetation establishment and erosion control, sometimes those things are linked, and you have to understand that the picture on the left is real erosion. Now, I grew up down in Southside Virginia, so for folks, laughing at my accent, that's RILL, real erosion. And typically folks think about it on hillsides, but on large construction projects where you have large flat open, acres and acres of land, even if there's a minimal grade, that can happen pretty rapidly. And so the picture on the right, the soil is in good shape. It's just the soil health is there, and you're not, you're not getting any vegetation. So what's interesting is that, most folks do think the ENS handbook in Virginia is a little antiquated, but the Virginia Department of Transportation, I think it's the Bridges and Roadside book, and they have a great qualified products list. And so if you're coming into Virginia from outside of the state to work or specify stuff on sites, that's a good thing to know, because a lot of local engineers and regional DEQ folks and the like will kind of move away from the ENS handbook sometimes and go to that qualified products list with VDOT and really help with some erosion control issues on site. So, we've talked a lot about pollinators and natives and things like that, and they're absolutely wonderful. I'm really amazed at the DEQ's work with what they've done with the Pollinator Smart program. But I think it's important to note the difference between a pollinator mix and a reclamation mix on a upper scale thing. And reclamation mix, let's just call it an erosion control mix. It's typically born out of the ENS handbook. But native seed mixes they have a lot of challenges growing them in Virginia and in the transition zone. And we've talked to them about them a lot. They take much longer than, say, fescues and clover to establish. Many of the pictures that we see on solar presentations are in the Northeast. If you plant a couple hundred acres of natives on solar farms in Virginia in May, and you're not well versed at what you're doing, or you don't have the right equipment, like Robin alluded to this morning, come August, you're going to have 200 acres of weeds, and that's really, a hard thing to try and work around. And consider also on top of that, a lot of this boom on what we're calling the greenfields is down on the North Carolina border, and you're talking about somewhere that gets up around 95 around July 1st and stays in the 90s through mid-September with 85 to 90% humidity. So there is a little bit of a resistance to change with a lot of contractors and even with a lot of engineers. Lots of times the pollinators come in, or the native seed folks come in with wonderful pictures from Vermont of, native seeds and pollinator mixes around solar farms. And, up there it's 85 degrees and 80% humidity. I mean, I don't even know if they've got air conditioning up there. So the point there is you really need to understand what's going on in Virginia. And part of that as well is what happens a lot is we talked a little bit about nurse crops, but to extrapolate on that, that's a millet over there on the right picture. And what's happened there is that was planted as a nurse crop, probably at, 10 to 20 pounds an acre. And then, like Robin talked about this morning, not an understanding of reclamation and pollinator mixes, folks come out there and it's just not green enough. So the contractor and the local ENS inspector says, well, throw some more nurse crop out there. And then what happens is that picture is actually too much, and it's going to choke out, whatever else is planted there. So in a year from now, when that dies, you may very well have some serious erosion control problems on there. So I think it's really great what we've done with the Pollinator Smart program. I'm amazed by it. I think the question came up Tuesday about, could you retrofit pollinators into solar sites? I think that's a great idea. Even, planning that to kind of temporary or permanent seed with, your basic erosion control mixes, and then come back with pollinators. I think eventually companies like Amazon or Google that might be in that space in Virginia or other states, they may create a cost share program to retrofit these pollinators into sites they're already involved in as part of their, overall sustainability initiatives, brownfields, landfills. They're going to be able to use that Pollinator Smart program as a template, whether solar panels are on there or not. I'm speaking about that actually at the SWANA conference coming up this year. And so we worked with a power company recently that wanted to do some pollinator retrofit sites, near some transmission lines. And it's no doubt in talking to them that they had poured over the Pollinator Smart program, and we actually used it as a guide to create those specifications to do what they're looking for. So I think the intrinsic value is really, it's unparalleled in what it could do in Virginia. Like we've talked about, I do think there's some challenges, but the best thing we can do is get out there and get in front of them. A lot of like what we talked about this morning, get them in the RFPs from the beginning, talk about them with the engineering community and with the local inspectors, and have an understanding of what it's going to take to create a site with native seeds and pollinators. So it's kind of come on so strong. We could have some, hesitancy with near-term successes, but I think it's just going to be great. I think we're doing the right thing. I think we've got to continue to educate and explain and inspire in, the hopes that we can move from kind of I guess, pontification to production with these sites. So, you know, when you think about again,
I love the alliteration, Joe.
Yeah, you like that. So, so the salesman in me, you know, tries to take all these challenges and help with solutions. You know, one of my favorite old adages is the pessimist sees the glass of water half empty. The optimist sees the glass of water half full. The salesman says, let's talk about the benefits of ice cubes. And, you know, so that's what we can do and what we've been doing in trying to get this Pollinator Smart program out there. So, you know, this is kind of an overview of who we are and what we sell, but it's also kind of what you're going to deal with on a day-to-day basis with erosion control and sediment control in Virginia. And you'll note the Chesapeake Valley Seed logo down there in the bottom right. Our company purchased them about 1.5 years ago, and it's really been phenomenal how we've been able to help on solar sites. They're really second to none as far as seedsmen that are actually based in Virginia. And
that's awesome.
You know,
Joe, we're out of time, but if you
right.
can, just a couple quick rapid fire questions.
Sure.
For you. Speaking of the Chesapeake Bay, phosphorus is a major pollutant affecting the Chesapeake Bay area. Are there any alternatives to granular fertilizer that can help decrease phosphorus runoff?
There are hundreds of them, and we can help you with that. The challenge, like anything else, is the antiquated you know, Virginia E&S handbook, and that a lot of times even engineers are hesitant to specify new things because so many of the municipalities are scared to deviate from that. You know, Dan, one of the most amazing things I've heard this week was earlier today when Michael was talking about the TAC group, and they may use it to pitch to the state the idea that we need to look at better E&S regulations. But you know, there are loads of different opportunities to other than traditional fertilizers that can give you the phosphorus you need without the runoff.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Dynamite presentation.
Yep.
You packed so much into a brief time. Thanks for making it real for us and identifying, you know, not just the pitfalls, but the practicalities of how, you know, we can actually work through some of these issues and proceed down the prospect of a super pollinator habitat on solar powered projects. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Glad to be a part.
You bet.
Thank you so much.
You got it.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.